Evening. We're going to move on and we're going to talk about. I have my AA book at home, but I have my NA book here. Step 4. And so some of you are here not because you're addicted to heroin or something like that, but you're here because there's been a trauma base. And that's also what this is about, is healing core pain, dealing with trauma bases. And but then addiction is an outward sign of that inward problem, is really how we're coming at this. And so we're going through the 12 steps, just listening to them to make sure that we actually understand what they're about, and filtering it through the Bible, because that's where it was based out of. So it's not a digital thing, it's a biblical thing. That's how this was written. And step 4 is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Now, moral inventory, if you look at that, it's kind of like what you feel is wrong and right. Right? So everybody's opinion of making an inventory of yourself is different than if one person took an inventory of all of you. Right? Let me tell you, this is, according to me, this is where you're all at. Right? So that makes it a little interesting, because the first time maybe you're coming in recovery of something, or you're coming out of a trauma, and you go to try to make a fearless moral inventory of yourself, you're taking inventory. Like if you're an inventory person at Walmart, you're going to come out and you're going to be looking at what's on the shelves, how many cans of beans are left, how many, you're taking inventory. But to do that for ourselves in the first stages of recovering from something is difficult to see what the inventory really looks like. It's difficult to get a head count on things. It's difficult to know where to put some of that stuff. So this is why sometimes people, once again, go through the 12 steps, or they'll go through aspects of the 12 steps, and they'll be like, it didn't really work for me. I mean, I tried AA, I tried whatever. Well, you have to go through this filter a few times, because the first time you go through it, especially if you're in the height of your pain, your inventory list is going to be so different than if it's like, yeah, I'm working the 12 steps again, and I'm really going to visit number 4. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hang out on number 4, and I'm going to learn how to do that. I'm going to be an inventory specialist, and I'm going to check that out. So we made a searching, which means you have to search your heart, your mind. You have to search your surroundings. You have to search what an inventory should look at. What's the inventory list? I don't even know what I'm supposed to be looking for. See how we can miss it just by not going, well, we're supposed to check out ourselves. Really is what we hear out of that most of the time. We go, I got to check me out. I guess I'm doing okay. Yeah, whether I got this area over here, weakness. No, we're searching in fearless moral inventory. That means I am not going to avoid certain aspects of my heart and mind. I'm actually going to go there, and oh man, I don't want to. I'll do the green beans over here at Walmart, but I don't want to be over here in the beef. It's bloody, and sometimes the packages are, I don't want to be in the butcher shop, but I'll do the green beans, the pork and beans. I'll do that. That's, I could do that. And we're fearless about the thing that we're the most brave toward, but it's scary to do the thing that it's like, oh, I don't want to do that. So that's another reason why we filter through, and running the 12 steps is kind of like salvation. It isn't that you get saved every day, but you reiterate your salvation every day. You run the 12 steps every day, but you reiterate your salvation every day. And so that would be like, I get up this morning and I realize I can't do this life without you, God. You are the King and the Lord, and I give myself over to you again today, right? And in some sense, I'm saying the salvation prayer again today, not because I believe that I'm unsaved. I'm just announcing the covenant that I've already made, right? So when we do that with the 12 steps, that's why, I remember my brother could quote these like backwards. I mean, he could just boom. Oh, you mean number 11? Blah, 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 blah. And then he'd have chapters memorized. It was crazy. Because he had gone through it. Well, part of what he went through, he wasn't understanding the approach. He just knew the concept, and he learned that we're supposed to check ourselves out. And I took it in for, I thought I was okay. Next thing you know, I was using. Next thing you know, I took off and I was with somebody. Next thing you know, that I shouldn't have been. So when you make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, you're literally saying, no, I'm going to look in, and not for a moment, I'm going to search this thing out. What is going on inside of me? I have been crying this whole week. I'm just giving an example of that. What is that? And fearless is like, I'm going to take a look at it. And when I do, the moral part will be like, that's wrong. That's something there is not right, and something is right. And I have to be able to sort that out. Well, what if in the process, your first time going through the 12 steps, trying to heal from trauma or trying to heal from addiction, or both, you're searching really hard and you're trying to be fearless about it, but you don't have a moral compass? Have you ever had that in an area where you're like, I tried to decide what was right or wrong, but I couldn't see it. I didn't have a moral compass. I couldn't find true north. Right? I didn't have a compass. And so step 4 is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. A lot of times when we're healing, we start digging into pain, we will make a fearless and searching inventory of the people around us. Hold on a second. I'm wounded. I got some stuff or whatever, but come on. Serious where you're at, and I have to deal with you people? See, so that's what it is. And then all of a sudden, it's like I am doing an inventory, but I'm not doing an inventory on myself. Or we'll be in a relationship, and we'll have that person pegged. We'll Google every type of everything from narcissist to whatever. Well, I've made an inventory of that person. I got that person down, and they're labeled, sentenced, and the whole thing. But I don't know where I'm at. So once again, if you're going to do the 12 steps, the first time you're going to skim learn through it. So you can't blame it on the 12 steps, like, well, I don't know, that's kind of dumb, it didn't help me. No, you skim learned it the first time. We looked in the mirror for a little bit and went, oh, I guess I'm having a good day, or I guess I'm having a bad day. And that's our inventory of ourselves. To do a fearless moral inventory, you have to have a compass of what morality is. That's why being in the Word is important. So what if you're doing AA, NA, NEA, and doing the 12 steps? Sometimes, we're making things up and, making our own classes or whatever, but using the 12 steps as a base. What if we're on this and we really want people to take a look at themselves and make an inventory? And they go to make that inventory, but they don't have that moral base. What are they going to do? It's opinion at that point. Do you think I'm wrong in this area? I don't know. I didn't think I was wrong in this area. That's why our higher power, once again, really needs to be Christ. He's absolute love. There's no power higher than that. There's no purity higher than that. He's where morals come from, right? Morality. And so when we make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, that's that thing where we're pushing to really look in, but we're like, I'm not going to be scared of this thing anymore. Like when you do a true inventory, it's like, I ain't fearing it. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to look into my heart. How scary is that? Right? And then as we do it, that moral compass comes up and says, when I took inventory, well, some things didn't look right in there. I'm missing stuff. Like I said, like if you're at Walmart and you're stocking shelves or whatever, you realize when you took inventory, there is no green beans. We should pay attention to that, right? So it'd be the same thing in the brain. There is none of that. I didn't get those memos. I don't have that operation. I don't know how not to be codependent. So there's a morality that happens. So this is why it's very much like the Word to do the 12 steps, because it's built in the Word. If you do it right, according to the Word, it's more of doing layers. So the first time you read, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, right? And so on. Or the 23rd Psalm. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures, leadeth me beside the still waters. We say that and we go, yep, he's a good God and he does those kinds of things. But there's a skim learning that takes place that first time that will catch some of it. But it's the 15th time that we're like, I'm going to sit on this first verse for a while. I ain't leaving it till he gives me a revelation of it. Now you're taking a different kind of inventory. So we're not always ready to do that when you're coming off of something, or let's say you don't have an addiction to a drug, but you have an addiction to a person. and the abuse they're putting you through. That can be an addiction. I hate it, but I have to keep doing it. It's that same kind of deal. And we're in that. Then it's going to be harder for us to take that moral inventory because it's really mixed as to whether or not it's right or wrong. We'll feel obligated. We'll feel all kinds of different things. And it's hard then to get in and grab a hold of it. But we have to run through it and search and be fearless. Take inventory. Then a couple months later, search and be fearless and take inventory. So if our big picture is to get healthy, then there is detail to detail that gets us there, right? If our big picture is a renewed vow or marriage or something like that, then there's detail to detail that gets us there. We can't fill in the details, though, if we haven't taken inventory. Because those details should tell us what we need to get there. But if we didn't take inventory of what we already have or what we're missing, then when we go to work that plan, it's not going to work. But the better you can take inventory, it's kind of like the Bible says it this way, count the cost before you go to war. So that means I'm going to stop and see what my weaponry is. I'm going to see if I even know how to do this thing. I'm going to see how safe I feel. If I was going to go to war, there's, what's my armor? Who's going with me? I want to know all that. I'm taking inventory before I go and I jump into that. Well, it's a similar thing when we take on meth. Or we take on the trauma we've gone through. I'm going past this trauma, right? Well, you better count the cost before you go to war. If you don't count the cost and you don't have a moral inventory that you've taken, you'll get yourself in the heart of it, and it'll feel like you're out in war and you're getting shot at by every angle, and you're like, why did I even try this? And then we crash, and after we crash, we don't want to try again. And that's what has happened. That's why we're going through the 12 steps a little bit at a time. Because if we don't actually know what it means, then we're going to skim learn it. Like, this is a night we write down some things for inventory for ourselves. You'll take your top layer and never get to the depth of the real issue. You might not be ready to get to the real issue. And so you take the top layer, but no, you need to come back and really search those back rooms and see if there's any green beans back there. See if the truck came in. See, did I not get any of the stuff? Or do I have what it takes? See what I'm saying? So tonight we're also going to talk about this in a way of sticking to the real subject. And I want to show you what happens when we're not able to stick to the subject in dealing with things. Let's say that your trauma is like in a box, and I use this as an example, where we've disassociated from it and we hid it and we denied it because we didn't have time, we didn't have the information, nor did we have the safety or permission to deal with it. Or we might have been so young it was like way too much information. So we threw it in the box, right? So there's stuff inside this box. And somebody triggers the box, opens it up, and all of a sudden we're faced with something that triggers us, right? And when I taught this at Empower, I had a frog, because that's what they had in the classroom. They had this plastic frog. And so I looked at the frog, so that's that object that was like, it reminded me, oh my, I remember this toy. My grandpa bought this when I was 4. That was right after he hurt me. See? So you can have an item in your life that will remind you, a physical item that will actually remind you of a trauma that's taken place. And so at the base of that is, here you have the trauma, here's the event. Is that the real issue? It starts out the real issue, but it's not the thing you're after. To get to the root or to the core, you're after what surrounded the real issue. The lies that surrounded, we've learned that, right? So here we are, we're after uprooting this thing, but to get at the real issue is I felt lied to. I hate when people lie to me. And I felt like that was the day when he hurt me, that was the day I lost my grandpa. So I felt abandoned. I hate abandonment. See, I'm just making this up, but this is how it can work. Just seeing that little frog that I had was like, oh, and it can be a good memory that starts out like, oh, I remember this. And then all of a sudden you're like, and I remember that. And then we have a resentment for it. So what happens is the brain, as it records these things, will say, the real issue is way too much for me to handle, especially if you were a child or a teenager. It's like, that's way too much information. So what it will do is it'll fragment and cause strings to be attached neurologically. So you know the saying where people like, you can have this, no strings attached, right? It's that type of thing. So what will happen is this main event took place, a lie went around it and said, you know, you don't have any worth, you don't have any value, whatever it was, you're always going to be abandoned and rejected, and people just don't like you. See, all because of that frog. That's what will trigger in the inside of you. So then as you're going through life, your neurons in your brain, your subconscious will actually look, I'm looking for anything to prove that that's true. Now, wouldn't it be nice if our human nature, if our subconscious would be like, no, I'm not. I'm looking for anything to prove that that's not true. That's not how our brain works, though. We've been touched by sin. And the subconscious job is to protect us. So it's not looking for, right out of the gates, like, how can I prove this wrong? That I'm worthy of rejection and I'm stupid or whatever it is you feel. How can I prove that wrong? They're like, no, if that's right, then I have to prove it. I have to have a calculated thing that says that that's right. So I'm going to start looking for it. Yep, my teacher doesn't like me. Yep, the neighbor yelled at me. Yep, my dad ran away and got hit by a car. Yep, see, anything that has to do with that same thing that says you're going to be abandoned and you're going to feel horrible about it. They started out with the frog incident. Right? You were given something, but something was taken away from you, and you felt lied to. And then now you had someone close in the family lie to you or accuse you of something, which all went back to the same story. Now the neuron, what happens is it's almost like if you take your hand like this and you go, here's the real issue. When that real issue gets triggered, it goes like this. It looks for all the strings that are attached. So an example of that would be, have you ever been in an argument that you started out knowing what you were talking about, and then within 10 minutes you don't know what you're arguing about? You're just like, I don't even know anymore what we're arguing about, but man, I'm going to win. I am going to win. I'm fed up with this. And so it's difficult then to get anything done. But what happens is, the reason that happens is the real issue is triggered. The real issue is you felt abandoned and lied to, like in this story. And maybe somebody brought up the frog memory or the thing that was given to you, the teddy bear or whatever, and boom, it hits. And right away your brain goes, whoo. And all of those strands coming off say, yeah, you remember all those things? That's proof that this is right. That's proof that it's going to happen again. That's proof that that's who you are. That's proof that we can't feel good about this. That's proof that we should be afraid. That's proof. Right? So we call that triggering. You know, don't trigger me. Well, something's going to trigger you eventually. You can trigger yourself. You can be alone and trigger yourself. And that's a form of anxiety where we've isolated away, and then we're just like walk into the kitchen, and we walk past a mirror, and we see something we don't like, and it can trigger you. And then we're like, there is no safe place. I can't get away from me. Everywhere I go, there I am. This is annoying, you know? And so any of that anxiety follows us wherever we go. So the strings attached are a training from when we were a child that said the first times we were hurt, we collected information that proves that this is true and that it will happen again. So these lay more low as long as you don't trigger this. You trigger that, and then your brain goes, people who are triggered will blink a lot, right? That's because there's a screen in their head, and there's a noise in their ear saying, what about, and they're seeing pictures, and it's going quickly. And it's like, wait, I can't take this in, because when it went, now you're not looking at the real issue. You're looking at all these different things, which are not really the real issue. So if we get hung up on all these strands, even though they're valid points, we get hung up on the strands, the strings that are attached, what will happen is we will never get to the real issue. Have you ever been counseling, or your parents sat you down with your brother or whatever, and there's an argument going on, and all of a sudden they have to interrupt and say, oh, okay, we're way off subject. Wait, let's rein it back in. We're not dealing with that right now. We're dealing with this. No, but you don't understand this and this. No, that's not what we're dealing with. We'll deal with that, but we're not dealing with that right now. Ooh, it's hard. If you're that person who's went, you want to deal with those things. Your subconscious wants to announce those things, and it wants to tell you those things, because that's the proof that this is going to happen again. How can I protect me if we don't acknowledge that all this stuff happens? Yeah, but we'll never get to the heart of the real issue because we're off subject all the time. So I always share this story. Some of you may have heard it before. My mom laughs about it to this day, but it wasn't funny at the time. And that is, as a little kid coming down the stairs, I remember, you sit on your bum and you come down the steps. It's kind of like you're sliding. We had like 15, 20 steps, so it was kind of a big deal for me. And then toward the end of the steps, we actually had doors, like French doors that would open. And so you could close that off so you wouldn't heat the upstairs. And so I'm coming down, and they're around the corner, so I can hear what's going on. They're arguing over what side Hitler parted his hair on. My mom's cutting my dad's hair at this time, which could be really dangerous, because when you get angry, it's just like, all right, baby, and what you gonna do? But it was like, it started out like, nuh-uh, the whole yeah, nuh-uh, yeah. It started out those little jabs, but it went big in a heartbeat. And I mean, he was to the point, I thought, he's gonna kill my mother. And talk about desperate, like, I don't know if it was Darn Limiter on the side. I don't know who Hitler is. Who is this guy that somehow interrupted our household and now mom's going to die? I mean, it went big like that for me. But when I look back at that, by the time the haircut was done, there were threats at each other. There were, we're better off apart. I never loved you. I mean, big statements over Hitler's hair. But was it really the subject? No, it wasn't. The subject was my mom wanted to be heard, because she studied some things too, right? And she said, no, I think it's on this side or whatever. And he shut her down. So that hit her core pain. And her core pain was the real issue. And so she probably said something back to him that hit his core pain. He's like, you know what? Now we're core painting it back and forth. Like, oh, touch that button. You go ahead, touch it again. And every time you touch it, the more these strands light up of all the other memories. And it can be paralyzing. You can be standing there just shaking, because I have to deal with all of these and I can't figure out which one's the real problem. Well, whatever triggered at the root is what we're after. But the brain, the subconscious say, leave that alone. We always just leave that alone. We got to deal with all these, because we got to know whether or not we're safe. Oh, it's hard. It's hard. We had 12 kids for quite some time doing foster care and stuff, and then we'd have family meetings, and one would be mad at the next. One of the things we learned is, like, there'd be an argument. You had 5 13-year-old girls. There's going to be an argument. And just, they grew claws, and it was like hissy fits. And so this is what we would do. Instead of, begin with, you grab a hold of the whole thing. You're like, we're going to deal with this now, right? Because we want this settled. Not a good plan. Because when you grab that, you're grabbing all of this. In all of them. Their core pain's hanging out. They don't know what the real issue is, but they went like that with all these strings attached. Now we're not even on the subject. So now we have to get, in order for this to close back up, it's almost like flour. Goes quick like that. So in order to close it back up so we can reason, you have to get the adrenaline out. So sometimes there'd be an argument or something, and my husband and I would be watching TV in our bedroom, just get ready to go sleep, and all of a sudden, ba 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 ba. It isn't like, hey, Mom. It's like, ba 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 ba, because now this is an emergency. This is an emergency. She said this, and then he was not, and he was on her side, and, it's not an emergency, but to their, this is world peace stuff. We got to solve this now. And so it would just drive him crazy because my husband would say, okay, but once we're finished with what we're doing is when we're going to deal with it. So I want you two to stay apart and go calm down. Oh. Okay, fine. Right? It was always like, because it was all hanging out, right? So by the time, and he would purposely, he still does this to this day if there's something like that, he purposely walk real slow into things because we're not feeding into this, right? Because, that kind of thing is when you feed into it, is that's all hanging out and you go to touch it, it's like a stingray and it stings you and you're like, you know what? And all of a sudden, poof, there you are. And now we're getting ready to slap kick everybody. And so this is going to be bad. So it's better to de-escalate it. You go for a walk, you go watch part of your show or whatever. We're going to deal. No, we got to deal with it right now. We don't have to deal with it right now. Then you talk like that. Keep his motions real slow and methodical. And sometimes I would be in the background like, tell that girl, she's causing trouble or whatever. But you learn that you got to take it slow. That forces, if you want to say, their pedals to retract. It's the craziest thing. It can be an hour later. And if you came in and go, what happened? Tell me. They wouldn't be at that state. They're like, well, I already told her I was sorry. I yelled it across the room. Because I know you told us to stay apart. So I was like, because I was thinking about it. And it was kind of dumb that I blah, 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 blah. And then the other one would pipe up, yeah, well, let's just get along. I don't want any trouble. Well, but when you knocked on the door, it literally was like, like there's a fire, right? So you have to bring it down to there's not a fire. Let's get to the real issue. So we wouldn't leave it lay when they did that. We're like, oh, that's awesome. So what we're going to do tomorrow is let's have a meeting and talk about what the real issue is. Because this seems to be reoccurring. Well, sometimes I would be like, oh, why? We settled it. No, it's actually not settled. We want to make sure you guys both feel safe. Right? Oh, man. And then we would do that. And you know what? They would share their feelings. And usually the ones that fought the hardest were the ones that came the best friends. It was crazy. They would hang out. They'd go swimming. They'd do whatever together. So, but if we don't know this and we're raised with that outward thing, what will happen is we never get to the real issue. My parents did not solve Hitler's hair. Because Hitler's hair wasn't even. I could have brought an encyclopedia and went, right here, see these pictures? That's Hitler. There you go, right? As a kid, you want to do that. You're like, there you go, you guys. But it wasn't the real issue. The real issue was, I feel unheard, is what one of them was saying. I feel run over. You don't respect me. See, all that was going on. That actually was the real issue. But at the time, as a child looking in, I was like, I hate Hitler. He's wrecking my family. Him and his dumb hair. So who cares where he parts it? And even in school, I mean, you had to learn about stuff like this when they brought that up. That would be in my memory bank. It was like, oh, that's that guy. Right? It's crazy how it'll trigger toward that. So the thought tonight, when we're doing and we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Okay. Is this the first place we search? On all the strings that are attached? No. We have to search till we find the real issue. See, we can't veer off and deal with this, that, the other thing. And then there was the time, and I remember when, and this always happens to me. Okay, calm down, calm down. Let's let that calm and let that close back up. And it'll come to you what the heart of the issue is. It's crazy. Sometimes people will be like, I don't know what it is, Pastor Mary, pray with me. They'll go home, they'll call me the next day, or they'll text me and be like, I found it. I was feeling really embarrassed, and I didn't recognize that. That's a moral inventory. They had to search that, though, fearlessly. And why it's fearlessly is because how do you face this? This stuff scares you. That's why we fragment out, and it's like, oh, my goodness, I can't. But you got to go after it and like, no, I'm taking charge of this. You close back up, let the adrenaline go down. I'm not dealing with all this little stuff. I'm after the big guy. I'm after, all right, this goes back to my grandpa. And I'm just making this up, but this goes back to he gave me something, then he took something from me. And he lied to me. Whoa, I did not see that before. You won't see it if you're looking out here. Now, what if you were raised where you had this issue, another issue, another issue, another issue, another issue, and no one taught you how to get to the real issue? Well, fires together, wires together. So now you have all these strings attached. And now they're winding around each other. This is where, like EMDR and therapies like that, break up clusters in the brain, because these strands that come off strand over to those other strands that are off the other trauma, which is attached to the other trauma that happened that we had all these strands attached to. And now it's this big clump. It's a big mess. It's like a ball of yarn all twisted up. So EMDR it cannot heal you. But what it does for some people, this works well, there's other therapies that are like it, is it just breaks up the cluster. So now all the strings are hanging out there. And then you do self-talk and tell yourself, it's okay, we're not dealing with all that. Let's get to the real issue. Mm-hmm. And it takes fearlessness to do that. Because out of all the issues, this one hurts the most. Especially if this one is the one that you recorded at the youngest age. This is when you have the least amount of understanding, the least information, the least permission, the least safety. That's what made it traumatic. So now this one might have attached itself, this strand or this string attached might have came off of something that happened that reminded you of that, and now you're 18 when it takes place. And here you are at 14, and here you are at 11. These strands are all there. But what if this happened when you were 4, and that's the real issue? So I have people ask me a lot. They'll say, what if if I'm trying to do a moral inventory of myself, and I can't do it because I can't remember? Like, well, a moral inventory is, do you have right or wrong thoughts? Are they functional thoughts? Are they functional sensations? You know? Like, it's not a functional sensation that if I say, why don't you come up here and I want you to just share it. Maybe pick something and just share it or whatever. And all of a sudden she stood up here and as a sensation went through her body of like, I am so gross. I hate being up in front of people. I didn't cause that, because right now in the moment, that's not even accurate. Right? So that's going back to something that would be a core issue. And when I hand the mic, I trigger that. Whew, people's ears turn red. They get one of the most fearful things for most people is speaking in front of other people. That's like one of the top things that people are afraid of. Well, isn't it interesting? When we get up there, all these strands light up to tell us why we can't be in front of a person. And this is going to happen, and I just know. And remember the time, protect yourself, protect yourself, protect yourself. And the brain will take over saying that. And a lot of times then we do sound kind of weird because we're stumbling over our words. We don't even know what we're saying. We had a whole thing planned, and now we can't get it out. Ever done that? Yeah. I don't know. That wasn't an area for me. Maybe it's because that, God knew this was my calling even before I was born again. Or maybe because that it didn't attach to my core pain. Because I was that person, and I'm not proud of it, but I did do this. I was like, oh, that's right, I have speech class. Oh, the bell just rang. That's right, talking to people in the hallway or whatever. And then I would just grab some of my friends' index cards that had nothing written on them. And I was like, what's the speech about today? And then I just get up and talk. So I didn't have that. You know, it was like, okay. And even in grade school, I would cry if someone was crying up front who was trying to do their book report and they were standing there shaking and crying. It would make me cry. I couldn't handle the fact that they were going through the emotion. It would get me so upset. I would almost be like, I can do it for you. Just sit down. I'll do it for you. Because it would just give me that much anxiety. I think I was in like second grade. You had to stand up and just do a little thing, which felt like a really long thing. It probably was 4 sentences of what your book was about. And one little girl started crying, and that upset me for days. I was mad at the teacher that she would be so violating to that little girl that she had to stand up in front. So I don't know what all that was attached to in my mind, but I do know that it wasn't around communication for me as much, the core issue. Violation of body, right? Or things like that, that might trigger some things. So when we're looking and we're doing a moral inventory, we have to have a gauge of what's wrong or right. So even a sensation can be off and it'll feel right to you. Like you can stand here and be like, I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like I'm going to die. That feels right to you because there's a belief system inside that morally, that's who you are. You know, that's what's right for you, not for somebody else. So when you go to evaluate that later, when you're searching through that, it shouldn't be like, why did they make me do that? As much as it is, what's going on inside of me that I can't stand up in front of a small group of people like this? What is that? The sensation tells me that it's not functioning right because it hurts me. That's how I know. It scares me. It makes me feel worse, not better. So that's how I know. So that's part of the moral. Other part moral would be like, you know, if I'm going to look at this and I was an abuser and I kept slapping somebody, you know, beating my kids or whatever, I should have a dawning on me that, well, morally, that's not right. And so sometime in addiction or in coming out of trauma, we've learned these different behaviors and we can even be told they're wrong. A police officer can tell us they're wrong. And then we can say they're wrong, but we don't feel they're wrong. There's a difference. So first you'll take a moral inventory. Then we might start out coming, maybe we're just a big drug dealer down in Minneapolis, right? And we're hurting people and people died or whatever. Morally, why doesn't that bother people? You ever think about that? Like, what is wrong with them? 2 of those young girls just died. And they sold them the stuff. Shouldn't that bother them? Right, but it also, they don't have a moral meter there. They haven't done an inventory that says wrong or right. What most people will say is, well, the officer told me I shouldn't do that. So yes, I was aware I shouldn't do that. Were you aware that this was wrong? Well, yeah, according to society. I don't have feelings that it's wrong. An example of that would be, working with the gangs down in the Denver area. Well, it was a big deal when my kids were little that people would drive by with blowguns and just shoot little kids in the legs. You know, they'd have those long needles and it would go in. Or grandma that's holding groceries and they'd drop their groceries and hit the floor. And they'd laugh and they'd think that's so funny, right? And it's just really weird when you'd interview them. If it was their grandma, it was wrong. For some of them. Like, you just don't do that to my grandma because there was some type of bond. But doing this other thing, we were just having fun. So it's like, are you crazy? That's what'll go through your mind. But they don't have a moral meter in there. They didn't learn that. They just know a command. And under the age of 10, especially, but definitely under the age of 13, we are in the age of directives. That means don't hit your sister. Why? Because I told you not to hit your sister. That's what a kid gets out of it. And you can give them a speech, see, this is wrong, and can't you see that you're hurting her feelings? And then we can give, and your 3-year-old's like, I mean, they're not picking up on it. They'll get something, but it's more of like, I'm going to direct you right now. This is wrong. So a lot of these 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old guys that were going around and women that were going around doing this, they didn't have a good starting point that said, even in the age of directives, that this was wrong. But then they also did not have that next section that realized, no, I realize it's wrong. Like, this is personal to, like, this, that ain't right. I'm going to cry about this. I can't believe I did that to that person, right? So when we don't have that, like we didn't get the memo, that's pretty rough. When this gets triggered, there's all this that takes place. If there's no moral compass in there, you're capable of anything, right? So sometimes we have the moral compass that says, I would never hurt another person. But we don't have a moral compass that says, I can't hurt myself. Right? There's something there that just goes, no, you don't hurt her. That's my friend. You get in there and you'll protect and everything. There's a moral thing that comes up. Like when you take inventory, it is like, but when it comes to someone hurting, you, no, I deserve that. When it comes to you're hurting yourself, well, yeah, that makes sense. There isn't something there that says, hold on, soldier, you're destroying your destiny. You are rotting your teeth. Your liver is about to, right? So it's difficult if you don't have a moral compass regarding yourself, because then when this core pain goes and you've been trained to follow the strings that are attached, you'll be so far out here you will not get to the real issue, and then you won't get that moral compass developed. You'll just be on rabbit trails. So the first times that, well, maybe not the first times, I don't have a memory of when the first time was, but somewhere in my first times of practicing, reining it in and sticking to the subject, I went through everything from bawling to being so angry that we had to stick to the subject, to not knowing what to say, to being like, fine then. I mean, it just went all over the charts because my brain was trained without resolve. So if your brain is trained to not resolve, you don't stick to the real subject. The more this fragments out, the more energy it has. If you just got this, it'll feel like, oh, I feel like I could die because I'm just remembering something so horrible. Okay. And the core of it just really hurts. But you add this to it, you have a monster. And it's powerful. And the more strands and strings that are attached, the more proof that this is valid, the more you have to protect yourself, the higher you're getting ramped up. And I don't know, and I can't deal with this, and I can't take this anymore. And then many times we'll go use. Or we'll do something that'll change the subject. Sometimes using is shopping for stuff you don't need. Like, I'm at it. I'm at the end. I'm just going to go. And you come home with a boat, and you're like, I don't know how that happened, but there it is. Always wanted one, but yeah, there it is. I mean, sometimes we'll shop for stuff we don't need. A lot of times women will do that with clothes. And when they do it, it feels so enamoring and right and everything, especially if you're doing it at a mall, because each store at the mall gives a theme that you're into. Right? We're aware of that. This is how they sell you stuff. Other countries, you go in, there's their clothes rack, there's no music. You'll notice it when you're in a different country because you're like, why is it so quiet? Right? Because we don't have the, going in the background and the pictures, and you're like, oh, I want to be in these shorts. That girl is so pretty. And we don't have any of those imageries. It's just, there it is. That's all you got. So, and those imageries are the thing that develop that in us, and then we'll go and we'll spend money that we didn't mean to, because in the moment we got caught up in it. But when we left the store, by the time we got home, it's like, oh, why did I buy this shirt? I don't even know if I like it. You don't know if you like it. You spent $40 on it. So we have a thing when I shop with Ari, and I did this with my other kids too. It's kind of like, if you don't love it, don't put it in the cart. And even if you do love it, if it's not the right price, I will take it out of the cart. These are our rules. So the parameters staying. So you're looking for something that you love that would be in the right price range. So he takes the work off of me going, no, yes, no. It's like, you figured that out. But you got to love it, because guess what? If I spend $30 on it, you're going to wear it or leave it in the car. And it's been interesting over the years, foster children, everybody that we've had with, they'd be like, no, I love it. You get up to the counter and they're like, I think I'm going to put this one back. Because they've thought about it, and it's like, I don't know that I could commit to wearing this and loving it all the time. So it's a skill. Because if you go with first impulse, right, you're trying to meet a need in your core issue, you'll go out and you'll go with first impulse, and it'll be for all the wrong reasons that you bought this thing. It'll be for the wrong imagery. So this is so deep when we say we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. First of all, it says ourselves. Ourselves. What you been working on all week? Well, I figured out my husband's a narcissist, and this is what's going on with him, and I figured, and I prayed about it, and the Lord told me this about him, and then hey, stay in your own zone. Get in your own lane. These are all different sayings that people use. Get out of his box. Get out of his circle. That's another one. You need to be working on you. It's good to recognize if you are married to a narcissist. Okay, that's fine. But if you are working harder on that project than you are giving an inventory of yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. So we could take this thing apart for another hour. But if you go through, you're at AA or NA in the facilitators, they're like, we're going to talk about making a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Okay. All right. You'll find that if it's handled like that out of the chutes, it'll be really shallow. Sometimes in your circle, then people will share, well, I just figured out I stay up too late. That's a good thing to figure out. Versus, why are you using cocaine, though? You're skimming off the top. It's something to say. But when you're really making an inventory, you're like, okay, here goes. I'm going to tell you this. It's going to be deep. And it's like, I think this goes back to when I was molested. I think that I have such a love hunger that I don't feel like anyone cares about me. You're not going to hear that a lot in some of the classes because they're not facilitated the right way. I'm saying, be careful. You'll get something out of it, but if you want to go deep quick and you want to make a moral inventory of yourself, then you have to literalize this statement. I'm working on myself. I'm looking at me. Oh, it's so hard because these look at other people. The core issue, when it's triggered, goes, oh, I remember when that happened to me. Then this opens up and goes, yeah, but check out all those other people that hurt you. Check them out. Remember? And you're just like, I don't even, And some people will literally freeze when that happens. Like, I can't even communicate. It will shut down your communication. Some people go into fetal position. Sometimes in classes, people don't talk about those things. I talk about those things because it's happened to me. And it's happened to you. Chances are everybody's been in a fetal position at some time where you just cry so hard that you think your guts are going to come right out your throat. Your eyes are all swollen. The next thing you know, you're younger than your age group. And you're like, how did I get here? And then when you go to reboot, what are you doing? When you reboot, that's because everything retracted back again. And you go, shh. To the real issue. Shh, baby, I don't want to hear you. Let's just go back to work. Let's just go to the park. Let's just do something. Did we deal with the real issue? No. We didn't. But we don't want to touch the real issue because we're afraid the shoots are going to come off and all these strings. I kind of picture it in my mind like, Mission Impossible or Batman. They've got those things on their belt and all of a sudden they shoot. And it's like, and it attaches to a different building or something. Well, now we're looking way out there. Well, the real issue is someone's trying to kill you right here, right? That's what's happening. But we're going to avoid that. So these shoots come off, and they attach the people to them that distract us from dealing with this real thing. So here's what I found, and next week we'll talk about this. I found that if you... wait till that retracts back in and you go to deal with a real issue, there has to be a boundary for you. You do an inventory. You're like when you go to count the cost before you go to war because I'm about to go after that real issue. And I know my brain is trained like this, right? So if your brain's trained like that, So then it's like, I can't allow that to happen. So you can't control it doing it up front. You can say no and it'll still do it to a certain degree. But after a while, it won't go out as far and as many if you start giving it a reality check. This is not even the real issue right now. I know those things happen. Not the real issue. I had to say it right out loud. So I give my brain a reality check. Not the real issue is right here, and I'm going to get to the core of it. So now you're telling your brain what you're doing. You're giving it the reality check of like, no, here's where we're going. But have you ever tried to give counsel to someone, help somebody, pray over somebody, stop by the sidewalk where someone's crying or whatever, and they're like this, and you try to give them advice at that moment? How receptive are they to that advice? In that moment when they're like, they might humor you like, oh, thank you for coming by and praying for me. But they're way out there. And so that's the worst time to give people advice. And this is usually what most people do. They're like, ooh, you got all that going on. I need to help you shut that down. You know what you need to do? These are lines that we'll give people. And as soon as you say that to somebody who's like this in the moment, they're like, don't tell me what I need to do. You don't understand what I'm going through right now. And the next thing you know, your head's off on the floor. Right? So it's not a good approach to step in that moment. Sometimes people in that moment, instead of waiting for an emotion to pass, will preach at the person. Okay, so this is what's going on with you. This is what I see. And we're going on, and the person's just like, just shut, okay? But they're not brave enough to say that. I've gotten brave enough to say that. I was crying over something, but I was crying out to God on something. And someone came up and they're like, I got this, and they're telling me all that. This is what I think you're going through. And I'm like, first of all, you're missing it, honey. No, not right now. I'm trying to hear from God. But thanks anyway. I mean, otherwise, they're just adding to like, let me add another string. Shall we add some more strings to it? And then you're like, I can't get peace at church. I can't get peace over here. Everywhere I go, someone's trying to tell me what to do. Oh, my gosh. That's how it's going to feel. How many of you know what I'm talking about? How many of you saw the notes on my hand? How many of you think that's professional? No, I forgot it was there. That's why I'm bringing that up. I have professional ways I handle things. It's very professional. So I didn't tattoo it there, so... although I know someone who would do that for me. We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So now I'm going to open it up to ask, how do you search for the inventory of yourself? Let's think about this for a little bit. If you're like, okay, I'm not doing this. I'm going to rein those back in. I'm going to give myself permission to not deal with this. Now I'm on the real issue. Now I'm going to do an inventory of myself. I'm going to search for, I'm looking, how am I looking? Give me some input on how you do that. And you're fearlessly doing it. You're searching fearlessly. How would you use the Bible for that? Okay, that's how God speaks to you, to be able to use the 10 Commandments to do that. Yeah. So when you do a moral inventory of yourself, one thing I want to encourage you into is don't take the law side of the gospel and put that over top yourself. Because in that moment, you already feel condemned and hurt and stupid and all the feelings that went. So what we're doing then at the moment is you can use the word. I'm not saying you're doing that, but I'm just saying that so everybody can hear. Some people will use the word at that moment where like, get back in line. I'm searching for stuff. You stop thinking this. The Bible says. Okay, well, we want to be careful we don't do that. But if you're looking for what's wrong or right, of course, that's what the 10 Commandments does show you, right? Well, the purpose of the 10 Commandments was they weren't aware that they were sinning. So it was like, oh, come on up here, Moses, we need to talk. that is a mess down there, and I am going to send some laws so that when you break it, your conscience is aware of like, oh, I guess that's wrong, right? But even though it was wrong, people still did those things anyway, because the law can only hold you accountable to a certain point until you change and that moral compass happens inside of you. And it's like, I actually don't need a law to know not to hit my kids in the face. I actually don't need that as a law. I just know because it's against the character of God. And I wouldn't want it to happen to me. See? So as you're sorting it, what's another way? So using the word, what's another way? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So have you ever lost your keys? Right? So part of it is people will say things to you like, well, where did you last leave them? And you're like, if I knew that, they wouldn't be lost. Well, they have to be somewhere. No. These are things we get to try to get help. But like what she's saying, is it asking the Holy Spirit to show you if you're doing a moral inventory. I can't see myself in all areas, but Holy Spirit dwells in me. He's in the temple. He's like, actually, I walk through and there needs to be some stuff changed in here. I like some of the things, but some things have to be changed. So, but if you lose your keys, sometimes when you've ripped everything apart, and it'll just ramp you up, you actually start going, the loss of keys can be where you're not able to stick to the real issue. Have you noticed that? You're like, okay, guys, I just lost my key. Well, Mom, we're going to be late. I know, but I'm looking for my keys. See, now we're starting to come up a level. Okay? Just wait. Just go in the car and wait for me. I am looking for my keys. Well, that's what happens when this gets triggered, because we are trying to prevent it going out to all the strands of the whole. Now she's going to be late for school, and I've had this happen before. This is going to be so embarrassing. I hate being embarrassed because I remember in third grade, I always got embarrassed when people, and I could just keep running. So you're trying to rein that in. No, we're just looking for keys right now. Everyone breathe, stay happy. But what if you make the whole circle of the house, rip the couch apart and everything, and you can't find them? When you made that inventory, you're like, I still didn't find the keys. I have to have those keys to get going. That's when many times where I'll say, honey, I lost my keys. Can you help me look? So, Holy Spirit, would you help me look? Because I'm not seeing. And isn't it crazy how sometimes you looked right at them? Like 10 times. They were right there. And my husband will be like, honey, they're right here. And you're like, oh. It's kind of a weird feeling, too, because you're like, I actually looked through that. I actually cleaned the counter off, and they're sitting right, because your brain is on overload. If it's predicting how wrong this is going to be and how embarrassing or whatever, it'll be right in front of you, and you can't see it. It's the same thing when you take a moral inventory of your heart. If you're ramped up and somebody says, so what's going on the inside of you? I don't know. I don't know where the keys are. I don't know. Okay, just help me look. And we have to be careful that we don't get into that and sit down and breathe. And I have learned that if I lose the keys and I got an important event, because that's usually when they get lost, because you're trying to gather all kinds of stuff, I will just sit down and do completely opposite of what that moment is asking me to do. The moment is asking me to search harder, to look faster, to breathe differently, to ramp up, to be like, okay, I don't know. Have you seen where, and we're talking out loud and we're moving really fast? Well, that's all these. So you do completely opposite, and you sit down and you say, okay, Holy Spirit, I have to find these keys. Help me. It'll be the craziest thing. It'll come to my mind. It'll be like, oh, I was in the bathroom and I set them on the sink. Got it. Thank you, Holy Spirit. It's the same thing when we're doing a moral inventory of ourselves. It's like I walked around this temple a few times. I couldn't find what I'm looking for. Would you go with me? You're the light. Light it up in there, Holy Spirit, and then point it out to me. and I'll receive what you point out. That's a moral inventory. But now if I do a moral inventory of you, this is the danger of, like, for instance, you get a DUI. And now you got a probation officer, and now you got a breathalyzer, now you got, the whole thing. That morality can be built in a law. You're doing all those things because I said so, right? The authority said, judge said, this is what you're doing, and you're like, I got to do this. Do you feel remorse about it? Maybe not. Because the moral inventory is you sticking to the real issue about yourself. What happens usually is people will be like, stupid copper, we have all these named the pig and all this kind of stuff, until somebody's breaking in our house. Call the police. Maybe that big guy that I met will come and save us. Suddenly we're nice about it. But when it's happening to us, it's like, and it's explosive, and everything's wrong with what the situation is because they're making me do this. That's why I've had people call and they'll say, will you hold me accountable? Remember I brought this up before? Okay, so it's Friday night. I'm going to call you and I'm like, are you drinking? I'm going to hold you accountable. Are you drinking? I can get forceful about it. I could show up at your house. Might save you, might not. If your moral compass doesn't tell you that it's really wrong, that law will not stop you. Will it? When you do a moral inventory and you have to see yourself, you're looking in fearlessly, and you're going to see the wounds, you're going to see the pains, you're going to see how deep the issue is, you're going to see your need for God. And then he's going to reveal himself to you. This is why sometimes being raised in the church can be just awesome, right? But then a lot of times kids come to salvation, like, oh, he accepted Christ, and we just go to Bible camp, and and it just keeps moving. Nobody's really doing a moral inventory of themselves. So a lot of times the kids will come up, and they don't have that relationship that goes, oh, but they can quote the word. They'll quote the word like crazy. Where somebody off the streets will come in, and they're sitting there, and they're, I'm without all of this. I don't even know what's going on in this place. Oh, my Lord, this is like all new to me. I saw myself for the first time. I need God. See? I need God. So even a church that's full of saved young people, saved any age group, can be, like I've heard like T.L. Osborne and different ones that are huge evangelists, and have gone home to be with the Lord, a lot of them. They would go and they'd travel to churches, and they'd sit in front of 5,000 people and bawl as the praise and worship was going, because they realized the majority of the people in the place weren't even saved. But if you asked them the Romans Road, they could quote it to you. The moral inventory is that aha moment where you go, I need God. He's going to be the only one who's going to get me moving. I can't get myself to even feel remorseful about what I did sometimes until his Spirit moves on me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? After a while, it'll even rein in your thoughts and mouth, because now you're thinking, well, I'm going to have a conversation here, but I'm also saying, what is she feeling like right now? Where is she at right now? See, I'm not thinking just about me because I have a moral compass inside. Have you ever had people talk to you that they're not thinking about you at all, but they're trying to help you? And you're like, wow, wrong timing. Just lost a baby, and you just came up and told me how God needed another angel and gave me this whole story. You are not thinking about what I'm going through at that moment. You're thinking about your method. I don't need a method right now. I need my heart changed. It's hurting. So see the difference? So now when you read this, we make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. What once again, I think that's probably the number one way, is saying, God, help me. Then you need the Word. The Word is revelation. Help you for what? You got to be able to show that. But if the Word becomes law, you only see a rule. So this is where, there's different religions where people use rulers to slap people in the hands, or you take away different powers, and you can't be in the praise band because you didn't recite such and such right. And all these rules that come there, it screws up their moral compass. Not that you're not supposed to have structure, but it will screw up the moral compass, because now when they go to do inventory, they're like, I don't even know how to sort this. I can't. I'm going to get it wrong somehow in here. The law says, but I don't know if I believe that. It's best for you to sort yourself on something that you believe. That's why we have to go over these steps. 10 years from now, go over them again and be like, I hit number 4 again. Oh, I saw myself like I've never seen myself before. I thought it was intense 10 years ago, but tonight, it's revelatory. See it? So how many of you were raised where you were not trained to stay on the subject? How many of you were raised where your parents didn't stay on a subject? And you felt that all the way around. It's like, that training makes it really difficult then to not fragment out. Yeah. And it can start as simple as you say, we need to get this living room cleaned up, guys. Okay, you took out all the toys. Remember I told you if you take them out, you got to put them away. Grandma will help you, or mom will help you, or whatever. But you got to be in on the action, because this is your responsibility. And suddenly we detour from that. And the stuff that's coming out their mouth is, stop it. This isn't fair. Why does he always get out of, I don't see what, blah, 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 blah. That's those fragments, and we're off the real issue. And I used to have to, especially when you have 12 children, I used to have to say to them, no comments right now. You could tell certain ones, like, that's not my sock. I'm not picking it up. You could just, but I learned, just get the work done. Many hands get the work done quickly, right? Right? So we're not going to try to figure out whose sock is what. Just do it. And then you'll find everybody's relieved, and we have a happier atmosphere. So it's similar with the brain. We're not going to argue and get in this thing for 2 days. And then here is one more thing. Here is where that area that I talk about where your cingulate can get stuck. It fragments out, and all of a sudden you grab a file, and it can't get off that. I just can't get over it. I can't forgive him. I just can't. And can't comes out of your mouth a lot. I just can't do this anymore. I just can't think. I just can't. When that happens, it's a sign your gear shifter in your brain is stuck. So imagine a dog that wants a biscuit, and you already gave him one, and he's just staring. You know how they do? And they'll stare at the container or whatever, and they're pushing, they're shoving on you or whatever. Their cingulate is stuck. And the only way you're going to get them off of that is be like, come on, boy, let's go. And you detour them to something different. Give the brain a different choice. We're not dealing with that right now. We're going to come over here. Same thing I brought up with little toddlers. Their cingulate will get stuck. Some kids, you can reroute them so easy. You can say, Billy, we're not going to play in that cupboard right now, but I got something we can do. And they're like, okay. And they come over here. Other kids, it's like, the cupboard. Yes. And they're doing everything they can because they will die for that cupboard until it's open and you find out there isn't something so great in it. But, you pull them away and they're like flailing and they're staring at it. The cupboard is really what their brain is saying. Well, now your cingulate's stuck. And some people have a weaker system to that. If you're married to somebody who has a cingulate that gets stuck, you'll know it. Sometimes we're not aware that our cingulate gets stuck, though. And that's, now you got these fragments out, and now we locked into something. It's like, yeah, that never got resolved. And I am not going to deal with this. And how many times? And you just can't get off of it. Rather than visiting it and go, yeah, that makes me cry when I think about it. But this is what we're going to do now, right? We're going to go after the real issue. And I don't have time for that to be freaking out my brain. You give yourself permission to walk away and play with a different toy. You're not the kid at the cupboard that just knows there's something in there. You'll see kids at the grocery store. Some kids will be where, like no candy when you're going through the checkout. And they're like, okay, Mom. Right? And you're like, oh, little angel. And some kids will be like, ah! And they're going back and they're scratching the parent's face, and they will die for that candy. Their cingulate is stuck, and until you reroute them, whether through discipline, right, or a positive reinforcement of something else, you're going to be in trouble. And some kids will hang time that thing. Like, they're still mad at you when they get up in the morning. Don't know. And you're like, yeah, this is still from yesterday. And the whole checkout scene, right? Right? So our brains can do that. So part of the inventory is, what is your brain like? Does your cingulate get stuck? How many strings are attached to your main core pains? And is it a habit that we just go every time? That's why we don't talk about stuff. We're not talking about it. I'm not talking about it. Because if I touch this, this is going to go off, and then I just can't do it. I can't do that again. We have to rein those in, get the adrenaline down. Then the next step is to get to the core issue. And even the core issue will scream at you like you have to deal with it right now. So I'm going to give you a little key to that. I don't have to deal with you right now. I can think about this for a week. And I'm going to. In fact, I think I'll buy a book regarding that subject. Get some information on your core pain. Will be and it's trying to get this to happen, but you don't let it do it. Rein it back. This is what we're going to do. Make sense? And then we train the brain to stick to the core issue. Guess what will happen? The next core issue we have will already know you're coming for it. And you'll already have the tools to say, no, we're not going down all these strings. No, we're going to rein this in right now. We're going to calm down. Let's calm down. Let's breathe. Okay. Let's talk quieter, because that helps. It tells your brain we are not in flight mode. But I can't talk quieter. Well, you got to work on that. I'm going to talk like a robot if I have to control my thought patterns. Don't say anything to me right now. I need an hour to de-escalate. Okay, thank you. You kids just do whatever. See you later, honey. Go for a walk, and you come back in, still at that tone of voice. Okay. And then you pick the right setting. You don't pick the setting where we're trying to do dishes after supper and everything, and now we're solving world peace. It's like, I picked the right setting. Now I'm going to talk about it, but I'm not allowing these strands. I'm just talking about the issue. See, I took control of it. Hard. Now, throw some meth in your brain. This will go out and hang out, and that'll be more your reality than the real issue. Your brain will be bouncing, just like your face does when you're, right? It'll go all over the place. Smoke some pot to get this to shut up. It'll only stay there so long. And this is the way pot works. If this is firing at this speed and you take it down with pot to this speed, you're like, this works. This is awesome. When the pot leaves your system, this will go twice as fast as it did before, which means you're going to have to smoke more pot. See? And now you're going to never get ahead of it. So it's better to train the brain to rein it in. I've learned this. My son is a great teacher at this. You look at somebody like Steven Seagal. It's not an act when he comes into a room, and of course they're acting in a movie, but he's a police officer right now for LA. Just because he wanted to do that. And so when he approaches a vehicle or whatever, right? He's not like, when you're like this, these are all hanging out. You're expecting something. And then you throw that vibe out to somebody else, they will meet you where you're at. That's why you don't approach a small child and like, yeah, stop. And be like, hey, you kids, knock it off. Well, now I'm equal with it where they're at. Or I brought it up a notch, thinking that's going to overpower where they're at. Oh, no, that only ramps up the neurons. Now you got the excitement in the brain going. Mom's mad. I saw her facial expressions. This is what's going on. Rather than just going on like, oh, you just pull them apart. Whoa, hey, no. We don't do that. And a lot of times kids will look at you like, huh? It like freezes them. They're like, why are you talking so quiet? It's wild. Just pull them apart. We're not doing that, okay, guys? Come on. Let's go over here, and we're going to keep it moving. All right, let's stand. I want you to think about how much and how often this happens to you, because if it happens a lot, you're moving toward panic disorder. Because these are the strands that make you panic. Right? When you're doing an inventory, you got to do an inventory like, what's going on? Maybe I got too much of this and not enough of that. So, and then watch the tone of your voice when you're dealing with something, how fast your body's moving, and do opposite. So you're concentrated on just, I'm not going to breathe fast, I'm actually going to breathe slow. Okay. Now, what was it you asked me? It's better to do slow. I just want to throw that out to you because we're going to retrain the brain. And we'll get back into this next week. Father, we just come before you in the name of Jesus, and we thank you that it is your will for us to prosper in our mind, to be at peace. In fact, you said as members of one body, we're called to peace. That's a calling that we have on our life, is the call of peace. It's the call of peace. Calm. He's in control. He's got this. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. See how you can feel the peace just settle? Because your mind is going, okay, I can accept this. I can accept this. So we speak to all the strands in our brain, all those little strings that are attached. Your valid points. We acknowledge you have valid points, but you're not the real issue. You're not the real issue. God, in this fearless search, come with us because we couldn't find the keys. Help us to find them with the peace and the light of your word, and you light up the path. You bring to remembrance. Your word says Holy Spirit brings to remembrance the word of God that lights up our path. Lord, bring that in so we can rein it in. And we fearlessly go into the darkest areas of our heart as you lead us. We're fearless about it. We're not here for a fight. We're just walking through, taking inventory. We're taking inventory because that's the next step. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Love you all. You're blessed and highly favored of God.